Just want to thank Lenita and Augustino so much, and Dr. Diehl called me over just to say how much he appreciates the piano playing. Lily, his wife, is a concert pianist, so he listens to this all the time in his home. So it made him feel a little bit closer to home today instead of Monday when he arrives. Dr. Diehl.
Thank you so much. I thought I was in our living room and my wife is playing on the grand piano. I don't know if you folks really appreciate. This is an artist extraordinaire, what you heard today. Thank you so much. Sometimes we take these artists for granted and we don't realize they spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day in practicing for a concert. This was very special, and thank you for all of you to surrounding me with such beautiful music today. I really felt at home. Thank you. Now, it was February 22, 1985. I was traveling in Southern California, and I listened to the radio, and they announced that Nathan Pritikin, the man I had worked for, had died at the age of 69 at his own hand. And I was shocked. I just couldn't believe it. 69 years of age, dying at his own hand. That basically means suicide. What happened? And then the next day I saw the headlines, Diet Guru kills himself. Tabloids. What was really the story? Nathan Pritikin had been diagnosed with coronary artery disease at the age of 42. He also was diagnosed at about the same time with a special kind of a cancer of the blood. And as I became more acquainted with him as an employee, and in many ways a respected person of the team, I had learned that Nathan Pritikin had actually acquired probably this malignant lymphoma, this cancer, as a result of radiation treatment that he had received 12 years earlier for a very innocent-looking skin condition. People don't realize that sometimes these blood cancers emerge after 10, 15 years in response to some medication or especially radiation treatments that may have been taking place. And so this man was, in all likelihood, a victim of a medical treatment at a time when the dose of radiation was much higher than it is today. But what about his coronary artery disease, coronary insufficiency, chest pains, angina pectoris? Well, Nathan Pritikin grew up in Chicago. He was an inventor. He loved his Jewish foods. He loved his ice cream. He loved his all the good things that people think they deserve when they become successful. They think it's an entitlement to gorge themselves. Well, Nathan Pritikin, in many ways, enjoyed those American foods, and at the age of 42, somehow, with cholesterol levels in the neighborhood of 7.5 and 8.5, began to show up as coronary insufficiency. He went to some of the best hospitals, ultimately ending up at the UCLA, that's the University of California of Los Angeles Medical Center, talked to the best physicians there, the cardiologists, and it was very clear that he had coronary insufficiency, he had coronary artery disease, a narrowing of the arteries, causing him angina pain in the chest upon effort. Well, he was really shocked. He was 42 years of age. Life was before him. And so he asked the physician, well, you know, what are we going to do about it? And he said, well, there's nothing you can do about it. When you have heart disease, you have heart disease. You better get yourself a wheelchair, or you get yourself a rocking chair. There's not much you can do. As a matter of fact, bed rest, no exercise, and then he said, we just will be keeping close tab of you. In those days, this was 1958, when a person came with heart disease, bed rest. I mean, don't even wiggle your toes. Something like this. And then this man, with a typical, I think, Jewish survival drive, he asked, is there anything I can do? I mean, so exercise is out. What about my high cholesterol, which is in the 8.5 area? Is there anything I can do about my cholesterol? And they said, no, what you have, you have. There's nothing you can do. You just picked the wrong parents. I mean, this was the wisdom of the day. We didn't know that you could change cholesterol in 2 weeks by making dietary changes. And so he became very disheartened, but he was still driven to find answers. And he's an engineer. He's an inventor. And so he began to go through the medical journals. He was always interested in medicine. He had almost a photographic memory. He was a most ingenious kind of a man, a very humble person, but he was very committed to goals. And he said, I'm going to find the answer for this. And so he began to realize that in New Guinea out there, New Guinea, south of Japan, in those islands there, people are living on sweet potatoes, and 85% of the calories they were eating came from sweet potatoes, and these people had no heart disease, they had no angina, they had no hypertension, they had no diabetes, and you know, these people looked very healthy. And so he went back to his physician and said, what do you think if I make some dietary experiments, you know, like these people in New Guinea? And I learned that in many parts of the world, there's no heart disease. And these people all live on a very simple diet, while we're having this Western diet. Could diet make a difference? And he said, no. And he said, well, I'm thinking of going on a vegetarian diet with lots of sweet potatoes. And they were shocked. And he said, if you do this, you are checking out against medical advice. I cannot have you here because you're going to become anemic because you don't get enough iron if you leave out meat. And you will have a B12 deficiency if you don't eat meat and cheeses and dairy. You need to do this. And they said, where are you going to get your calcium if you really become a total vegetarian? And what about your protein? You need to have protein. Protein is only found in animal products. These are the kind of ideas that were very commonly found in the medical profession in those days. And they still are spooking around today. Well, we had one patient in Rockford. The physician called me up and he said, what are you doing to my patients? I mean, I'm losing my patients. And I said, how do you spell patience? Is it with a C-E at the end or a T-S? No, I'm losing my patients. I'm losing my customers because of you. I said, what happened? Well, he said, that lady came to me and she had some pretty good blood tests. I was kind of curious and I said, well, how did you get, what medication are you using to get the blood sugar, blood cholesterol down so far? And she said, I'm on the CHIP program. And I said, the CHIP program? Isn't that this vegetarian program? She said, well, yeah, we don't call it a vegetarian program, but this is a good way to go. We promote these ideas. He said, don't ever do this because you don't get enough protein. And then he said to me, and then this woman said to me, Doc, you don't know beans about protein. And she walked out of my office. So Nathan Pritikin suggested that he would go on a vegetarian diet, and he was clobbered as being suicidal, and the physician let him go. I cannot take care of you because you're doing these extreme kind of things, and that was it. And so he was very concerned about it, and so he began to find another doctor that would allow him to have blood tests done and to follow a vegetarian diet. And every week, this man, Nathan Pritikin, had his blood taken because he was worried that he would go into anemia, an iron deficiency, a B12 deficiency, and all these things would happen to him because his expert doctors had advised him that these things would all happen. And instead, his cholesterol dropped very nicely. I mean, he was stunned. I mean, you can see it right there. It was 8.5. Now it was 7.0. Then it came further down, You can see here 5.2, 4.0, 3.0. I mean, you see the progression there all in pretty good short order, right? In 1958, went down from 7.0 down to 4.0. And he said, I'm beginning to look more like having cholesterol numbers like those people in New Guinea, but they don't have heart disease. Maybe I can reverse my disease. And he felt good. And there was no B12 deficiency. Of course, that usually takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years anyway. This doesn't happen fast, if anything. And he had good strength. There was no protein deficiency that he could figure was doing anything to him. He said, I get enough protein from my beans and from my sweet potatoes and from my yams. I mean, protein is everywhere. And so then he started talking to his wife, and he said, look, these doctors, they were not quite right when they told me that you could not change your cholesterol. And they warned me about all these things that would happen to me, and nothing has happened. You know, maybe their medical common wisdom about not having, that I could not exercise, maybe that could also not be right. Why don't we get into an exercise program? And she said, really? I mean, you could kill yourself. And so he said, why don't we go together? And they would walk for 5 minutes around the block. And he didn't die. He was shocked. And he walked around 10 minutes. And he didn't die. He was shocked. And he walked around for 30 minutes. And he didn't die. He was shocked. And then he said to his wife, Eileen, he said, Eileen, look, I mean, don't baby me. You know, we can have some walkie-talkies. Let me just go on my walk in the morning, and if something happens, you know where I'm going to go. You can pick me up, you know. So they did, and he never called. He felt so good that after a while he began to jog. He did what they call the jog-walk interval method. You walk for 2 minutes, you run for 1 minute, you jog, you walk for 2 minutes, and you jog for 1 minute. And so he began to do this routine, and he began to walk more and more. Every morning he was out there at 6 o'clock, and he had his running shoes on, and he was gone for an hour in Santa Barbara at the beach and so on, and he just enjoyed it. He became stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and people happened to see him. They knew that he was sort of a heart disease patient, and they said, Nathan, what are you doing? You look great. Well, I'm just taking life into my own hands. And before you knew it, he had many people that followed him, and he had heart disease patients coming to him, and he knew that he was unto something very, very important. And it became his mission, he said, to, it became his mission to abolish heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and obesity in America. That became his mission. Just a very simple statement, right? A very small goal, just abolish heart disease. And he said, I need to do it by helping Americans to break their love affair with their foods. I need to introduce them to what he called foods as grown, simple foods, right? And as he saw more and more of these people coming to him as a counselor, he became very active in promoting this kind of a diet concept, where he said, maybe we shouldn't have 40% fat. And he recommended it should only be 10% fat. And we shouldn't have 15 to 20% protein. It's too much protein. We need to do the protein diets that you have in countries where you don't have heart disease. Maybe it should be down to 10%. And then he said the rest should come from starchy foods, right? Unrefined starchy foods, like potatoes and yams and beans and fruits and vegetables. And so he called this the 10-10-80 diet. 10% fat, 10% protein, 80% whole complex carbohydrates. While the American diet, the Canadian diet, was then 42% fat, right? And then you had about 15 to 20% protein. You had a lot of sugar. These are the simple carbohydrates. And there was very little complex, unrefined carbohydrates eaten. So he really became very much involved, and then he began to write his book, Live Longer Now. And since he was not a physician, he was not a credentialed person, no publisher touched his book. And so then he developed an artificial advisory board. These were imaginary names, and they all had doctors behind the names. He made those all up, and he sent it to the publishers, and now they took the book and said, this is a great book. Became a bestseller in America, How to Live Longer Now. Again, it shows the biases that we have. In the old days, when you were a woman and you submitted an article or book, it oftentimes did not get published because it was a woman author. So we have these prejudices in our society. Fortunately, some of these have diminished since then. So his book became a bestseller, and people said to him, well, you cannot make all these claims that you can possibly arrest these diseases or maybe even reverse them unless you've done some research. You have to do research. Well, he said, where do I get the money from? Well, he invested his own money, and he enrolled people in a special project in the Long Beach study. And what he found was that in one person, and he gave these people free foods as long as they wanted to be in the study. He was a very devoted man. And in one case, the angiogram that was done before and the angiogram that was done a year later showed that the artery had begun to open up. And so he spoke at some health convention, and he talked about heart disease reversed. And then, of course, the medical community looked at this and said, well, yeah, it could be, but it all depends on how the camera was taking the pictures, and they had all the different reasons, which are all legitimate, but nobody really wanted to really admit that this engineer could possibly be right in reversing heart disease. I mean, that was unthinkable for the pride of a profession to accept. But the word got out. I don't know, it was a National Enquirer or some magazine that picked up the story, and it spread all around, and people now began to call in from Hong Kong, from New York. They called from Vancouver. They called from all over the world and said, we have heart disease, and we have been going down the tubes. We're taking more and more medication every year, and nothing is changing. What can we do? You seem to have found the answer. Help us, he said. I have no clinic. I have no institute. I run this from my kitchen table. I'm just excited that we can do something about heart disease. We can do something about the cholesterol. We can do something about the triglycerides. We can do something about the high blood pressure. We can do something about the diabetes. All these things that drive this disease. And so they said, can you rent a hotel or motel in Santa Barbara, and we'll pay for it? How many people should be there? How long should the program be? He said, I have no idea. Okay, 30 days. Well, can you have a chef to cook for us? He said, I don't have a chef, but I will find one, and I'm going to teach him, and I'm going to make it available to you. How much are you going to charge us? We don't know. He said, we have never done this before, but we're interested in helping you. In the meantime, the American Heart Association heard about this man and about the incredible claims that were made, and they all knew that he was a charlatan. He's an inventor that wants to make money. I mean, he's from California. And so he became blacklisted by all the medical societies. And even though he appeared now on television, he had a lot of good connections there on television, and he would be on these television debates with the cardiologist, and they would say to him, Mr. Pritikin, what do you... And then he would say, Doctor. And the people loved this underdog relationship because he always had the right answers. He knew, he had studied this thing out to the T. Remember, he had a photographic memory, and he was writing all these things down. He was he was a genius man. And then he opened up his clinic. These people came, 16 people came, and the results were absolutely magnificent. He was himself astonished. Because after 1 week, he would do the cholesterol every week, And within 1 week, he could see the cholesterol dropping, and people had said it will take about 6 months to 12 months before you can affect the cholesterol. It will probably come down very much, but he knew how to do it because he had the 10-10-80 diet, vegetarian. Oh no, it wasn't vegetarian. He gave them 1 ounce of chicken a week because he didn't want anybody to say that this man is a vegetarian because they thought that he was a remnant of the Chicago hippie movement. Are you with me? So you give him 1 ounce. You know what 1 ounce is? That's 28 grams. You know, they got a little fiber every day so that nobody could say, this is a vegetarian program. But it was, really. He just didn't want to give that impression out there because people were biased towards these kind of concepts. And then Senator McGovern came. He's one of the senators from the Dakotas, and he was the chairman of the Health and Nutrition Committee in the United States. And when he came to Pritikin, he said, I have high cholesterol. Nobody can bring it down. There are no drugs that we can use. We don't know what to do. I brought my staff here. Can you help me? And you know, within the next 4 weeks, the cholesterol dropped big time. And he was sold, and he said, we need to bring the Pritikin concepts, the 10-10-80, into our governmental guidelines for America. And they basically tried to do this. Of course, there was a lot of opposition from the egg industry and from the meat industry and the dairy industry and the salt industry and the sugar industry because everybody's at the trough. And then 60 Minutes came. You know 60 Minutes. You have that up here too, don't you? Yeah, 60 Minutes came, and he said to me, you say, Hans, you think we should let these people come in here? I mean, they want to bring their own physicians. They want to pick their own patients. And then they want to take some baseline values. They want to interview these people. And then they come back after 3 weeks are up. Towards the end of the program, the 4th week, they come back and they measure everything again. Do you think we should, is the risk worthwhile? I said, I think it is. He said, I thought so too. He said, we have had over 150 patients by now. I think the results are always very similar. We should be able to do this. And so 60 Minutes came. They picked their 3 patients. They had their physician from the Miami Heart Institute come along to examine these patients. And they filmed all these 3 people, and then they left. And after 3 weeks, they come back for the 4th week program. And they looked at the second blood tests, right? They interviewed them again. And these people were new people. I mean, we were lucky they picked all the right 3 people. They were all still alive. No, I mean, nobody ever died that I know of. But nevertheless, I mean, it could have happened, right? And so the response from the North American public and beyond was so high that they almost burned out the switchboard at the Pritikin Longevity Center, which now became more and more of a center officially recognized. And then, of course, the medical profession was very upset. They would call 60 Minutes and say, look, anybody that goes to California, you have a nice weather there, you have palm trees, and you have no stress, and you get a good diet. Of course you're getting better. What did you expect? But these people will not be around a year from now. They will all fall off the wagon. They're probably going to be dead by then because they're heart disease patients. And so 60 Minutes says, okay, we're going to come back in 1 year. So 60 Minutes came back a year later and went to these 3 patients. One lived in Chicago and 2 others, I forgot the exact cities where they lived. They interviewed them. And they had this doctor from the Miami Heart Institute do all the blood tests all over again. Everything was checked out. Do they have angina pain? What's their blood pressures like? Do they have medication? And they were absolutely stunned. And so they had the next 60-minute, 1-year report on 3 Pritikin patients. And they were all alive. I mean, it was good. I mean, you never know. And they were a glorious example of what can happen when people make lifestyle changes. And of course, Pritikin became famous, and as he became famous, he wrote 2, 3, 4 more books. They were all bestsellers. And now the publishers all wanted to publish his books. See, before it was different. And nevertheless, Pritikin program became more and more accepted. The people steadily came to find health and hope and healing. But I was absolutely shocked on the 22nd of February, 1985, when they announced that Nathan Pritikin had died at 69 years of age at his own hand. And I called the office there, and I called his widow, and she said, Hans, the funeral is at such and such a time. We would be very happy to have you there. And so we went there, and then the story emerged. The story emerged that Nathan Pritikin's lymphoma, this blood cancer, had that it came and it went, it came and it went. It was one of those cancers. He was very, very, very deliberate in his lifestyle. He would never go to bed after 9:30 at night. He would always be up early in the morning because he said the body needs to have a regular rhythm, especially when you have cancer. And he was very, very careful to follow a very vegetarian diet. Lots of vegetables and fruits. He was very, very consistent, but he was also working very, very hard. He was in perpetual motion all the time. He had his sandals on, and you could see him everywhere. At the moment a medical journal came out, he would sit down and read this, and he would just internalize that. And he was an absolutely super bright man with a photographic mind, and also with a special sense of humility. So, as the word spread, people were interested to find out what actually happened to Nathan Pritikin. And so during the funeral, several things emerged. Number one, he really wanted to have this lymphoma, this cancer, to be taken care of somehow. And there were all kinds of new medications that appeared on the market. One of these drugs was a very powerful drug that was a drug of great promise, interferon. Interferon, a very powerful, promising drug. And Nathan Pritikin assented to use that drug, and within 3 days, his system was in the verge of collapse. His kidneys no longer worked very well. His hemoglobin went all the way down to 7, and a man that had very good numbers, in very short order, the good numbers collapsed. And he checked himself into a hospital in Albany, New York, under an assumed name. He didn't want anyone to know who he was. And this was the best kidney hospital probably in America, or one of the best. And it became very obvious that all help came too late. And here was a man that had helped so many people, and as his own life was ebbing away, he took care of his own life by taking his life to shorten the agony, because there was nothing that could happen. So when you really look at it more correctly, it was probably what we call euthanasia, to shorten the inevitable. But the tabloid press had a heyday. Diet guru kills himself. That's really what happened. They did something else. They had a rabbi there, and the rabbi gave a short homily, and he said, there was a time in the Middle Ages when a Jewish person would not be allowed to be buried in a Protestant or Catholic cemetery. They were always buried on the outside of the cemetery. They were outsiders. They were not valued. They were not recognized. They were not appreciated. Put them on the outside of the cemetery lines. And then the rabbi said, but as it happened, over time, over the years, the cemetery grew larger and larger and larger And ultimately, they found this Jewish man at the center of the cemetery. And you can see the allegory here, right? You can see the example, what he was hinting at. And he kind of gave the idea that maybe someday, while this man was not really valued, he was seen as a heretic by the medical profession who made all kinds of claims that he could reverse heart disease. Ultimately, maybe he might be at the center of this new health movement that began to go viral. And then there was Senator McGovern, and he did the eulogy, and he said, very few people have invested themselves with as much earnesty, effort, and serious of purpose as this humble man that has helped thousands of people to find their health by helping them to move towards a simpler diet. Foods as grown, plus exercise. And then came the chief of staff of the Pritikin Longevity Center, the physician, and he said, I've been asked to give you the report from the autopsy. And he said, when the autopsy was done, the pathologist doing the autopsy had no idea who this man was. But he said, this man had a lymphoma, a certain cancer, in partial remission. He had been on intermittent chemotherapy. That means he had medication therapy. And during the last year, a very special drug was used called interferon, which caused severe complications. Then the report said, number two, when we looked at the circulatory system, all major arteries and coronaries were very soft. Remember, with atherosclerosis, they become brittle and hard. They were soft and pliable. That means they were very elastic, without any evidence of atherosclerotic plaques or vascular disease. As a matter of fact, the pathologist said, I've never seen anything like this in my clinic here. He said, this is more like a 9-year-old's arteries. This man must have been in Bangladesh or some country where people eat very poorly. He didn't know this was Nathan Pritikin, a man who had at the age of 42 been diagnosed with coronary insufficiency with heart disease. And then this report appeared shortly thereafter in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is a very prominent magazine in the medical profession. And it said Mr. Pritikin lived a very vigorous life. And until late 1984, he ran several miles daily. In a man 69 years of age, the absence of developed atherosclerosis and the complete absence of its effects are remarkable. Proven in death. This man had to die to show in his own arteries that this was a reversible disease. We had laughed at this man, me too, years earlier before I joined him, when he made claims that this disease should be reversible. Dr. Burkett had talked about it, that it should be reversible. But most of us were very, very skeptical. And he said, well, look at the monkeys, look at all these studies, we can reverse this. But we said, oh, no, but not in humans, because in humans, you develop this disease very slowly over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and it's as hard as a rock. You cannot reverse those kind of calcified plaques. Here's a man that proved in his death that he was able to reverse his own disease by breaking the love affair that he had with his American foods. In the process, he became a great beacon of hope and of health, ushering in a wellness revolution second to none. And I was very fortunate to be there and to be very close to him and to learn some of these concepts that I never learned in my university training. The importance of a 10-10-80 program. You understand that now, don't you? Moving towards not just a vegetarian diet, but also moving towards a diet that diminishes processed foods, diminishes the use of fats and oils and grease in the diet, that moves towards less sugar and salt. As we are closing a very special day, allow me to perhaps make a few comments. This is the end of a special day. I want to close, if that's okay with you, with a short meditation. Is that acceptable to you? Yeah. You know, 2,000 years ago, another man, a man God, came, and he was also misunderstood. He also tried to help us to understand that there's an engineering manual of how we can find happiness. And he also extolled the good book as a guiding manual of how to find happiness, how to be a giver rather than a taker. And he too was pursued by ecclesiastical opponents who had no use for a man that provided a new ethic of serving others. He became the master teacher. He told all the parables. He was the man that healed. The Bible says wherever he walked through a village, there were no sick patients left. He healed wherever he went. People think of him as a teacher. People think of him as a preacher. He was a healer foremost, because he healed not only the physical ailments, but also the ailments of the heart and the soul. He was really the master healer. But we didn't understand him. And there was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot of distrust. There was a lot of self-serving. And ultimately, we took him and we got rid of him. We put him on a cross. And he took it willingly. He opened up the channels of love. He opened up the channels of atherosclerosis, of the arteries where love should be flowing to others. To take care of jealousy and greed. And it was too much for us then. And we nailed him to a cross. And he says, Father, forgive them. They just don't know what they're doing. In my 68 years, I have found that this man provides a unique anchor for our souls. He's a man that came to us as a godson to bring us back to the Father's house. I highly recommend him to you. He means all to me. Thank you.
This week has been better than I could have ever imagined, and today even better than I could have imagined. I'm just so thrilled to death that all of you have taken the time to come out. I know that it has been just an overwhelming day. The messages have been the best that I've ever heard in health. The years have passed very quickly. 13 years ago, Gordon and I made a radical decision to give up animal products and processed food. People thought we were crazy. And then when we decided to do the CHIP program, Pastor Alex is laughing. Then when we decided to do the CHIP program, we never realized that not only would it continue to give us good health, but it would make a difference to others as well. And the people here we all know very personally, and we have great love for all of you. One of the Bible verses that I just want to end with tonight is John 10:10. It says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy." And that's exactly what the foods that the devil has designed. They come to steal, kill, and destroy our health. But Jesus came and he said, I come that they may have life and have it to the full. That's what he wants for all of us, is to have life to the full. And you cannot have life to the full if somebody else is making your food. And so I just want to thank Dr. Diehl for coming here, to spending his week. I mean, he could be home with his family in a warm country, and he's come here to spend the week with us and give you this message. Tomorrow he's going to do one more message at 3 o'clock, and I just encourage you all to come out and hear his final message. We were at the Rotary Club this week. There were 18 people there, and all of them were just so overwhelmed with him, and were encouraging us to, let them come into a program, but they didn't want to wait till October. And Dr. Diehl said, you should have one in May. And I pretended I don't hear very well. But, that's the problem. When you have something that someone else needs, you feel like you're preventing them from having wellness. Anyway, I just want to thank Dr. Diehl so much. Thank Pastor Alex. He's worked very hard at pulling this together as well. I just want to thank the audio-visual group. They have worked very hard. It's a big job to make sure everything runs well, and they've done a great job. And thank you all for coming, and we'll just have prayer.
Just want to remind you that tomorrow at 3, the message is Eat More, Weigh Less. Everybody should be interested in that. So bring all your friends at 3 o'clock tomorrow at our church, 805 Shelbourne Street.
That's why I have Gord around. Anyway, we'll just bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much, Lord, that you did come, that we can have life more abundantly. We thank you for Dr. Diehl, who has spent the last more than 26 years. The chip has been on the road long before that. He spent really his entire life pursuing health for not just himself but for others, and we thank you for that mission. We thank you, Lord, that you have given us this information, and we just ask that as we seek to eat better, that you will give us not just physical but spiritual and emotional healing as well. Bless us as we leave here tonight, Lord, and keep us safe as we travel toward home. In your name we pray. Amen.